This is the story about a world that is clearly not reincarnation, but a fantasy game once played many times. It begins in another world of swords, magic, and harem elements, marked as Slayer Year 101, April 5th, the day of the entrance ceremony, as the 42nd round starts. Students gather and exchange morning greetings, their excitement mixed with nervousness about the ceremony and fear of exam results. The setting follows the structure of a sword and magic fantasy role-playing game. The scene shifts to an office where a boy sits at his desk, drinking while playing. His endurance, built through long experience, allows him to withstand even a bleak workplace. No matter how many times he plays, he never grows tired of the game. What sets it apart from ordinary role-playing games is the ability to deepen bonds with the heroines and eventually become lovers. The entrance exam results are announced, introducing the main four characters. Shell Uranus ranks 5th and begins as a mage. Nagisa Seikei ranks 4th and starts as a swordsman. Aerith Centrea places 3rd and begins as a cleric. Leon Praise ranks 1st, a descendant of heroes whose starting role is Spellblade. The main story focuses on controlling Leon and increasing intimacy with the heroines. Alongside the main plot, many large and small sub-events are included. Most are well known, but rumors persist among fans about undiscovered events. Finding these hidden events becomes one of the pleasures of repeated play. As the story progresses, outfit graphics change depending on circumstances, adding variety. The game's visuals draw admiration, and much of its popularity comes from its adult rating, which allows the creation of a harem. Even so, the emotional growth between characters remains gentle and engaging. Players praise the balance between serious role-playing elements and eroge aspects. Danbur becomes highly successful and is later adapted into anime, manga, merchandise, and other media. An all-ages version is also released with adult content largely removed. Back in the office, the boy suddenly feels pain and realizes how tired he has become. He lies down on a cushion and decides to sleep for a while, bringing the moment to a quiet close. This is the story about a game that is deeply disliked. Its name is Dungeon Brave Soul 2. A character who did not even have a name in the first game suddenly becomes central in the sequel. The story begins after Leon seals the Demon King. In the second game, the player controls a new character named Xenon Bart. Xenon approaches Leon and becomes an unwanted companion, gradually forcing his way into Leon's life. He befriends the heroines and forms a party with them, but over time the situation begins to change. The heroines slowly distance themselves from Leon. Xenon stands at the center of that shift, taking Leon's place little by little. Leon finds himself isolated and cornered. Eventually, Leon is confronted with a scene that breaks him completely, pushing him into despair. Unable to endure it any longer, he releases the seal of the Demon King. As a result, the world is destroyed. What was once a tale of love and battle turns into something dark and grotesque. The game that was once beloved becomes an unwanted experience, transformed into a twisted narrative that leaves a bitter impression. Because of this, the game is hated and never wished to be played again. Then awareness returns in an unfamiliar place. It is not a bedroom. The body feels different, lean and muscular, standing in a luxurious room. Confusion sets in while looking at a reflection that feels deeply unsettling. The face staring back belongs to Zenon Baskerville, the character most despised in the game. Reality feels impossible to accept. This is not the favorite protagonist. This is the villain, the one that ruined everything. And so begins the story of someone reincarnated not as the hero they loved, but as the character they hated most, trapped inside the very game they wished had never existed. The face reflected before him is Zenon Baskerville. This is the world of Dungeon Brave Soul, the one he despises the most, and Zenon is the central figure of Danbur 2. Confusion and anger surge at once. Of all people, he has been reincarnated as this man. He wonders what kind of evil deeds someone must commit in a past life to be reborn as a man known for preying on women. If reincarnation was unavoidable, he would have chosen to be Leon, the protagonist he admired. A maid enters the room and apologizes for coming in without permission. She explains that even knocking usually fails to wake him, so she entered on her own. She bows deeply, asks for forgiveness, and offers to accept punishment as usual. Her words make it clear that this treatment is routine. The realization is disturbing. Anger rises, but he forces himself to stay calm, knowing that reacting too strongly would draw suspicion. He tells her there will be no punishment and orders her to put on her clothes. She hesitates, surprised, and says that normally it would have been far worse. He repeats himself firmly and tells her not to make him say it twice. She agrees and dresses. He notices that her clothes are primarily black and clearly belong to Zenon. When she finishes, she asks what she should do next. Looking closely, he realizes she is quite beautiful and is shocked that someone like her was treated as insignificant. He asks the date. She answers that it is April 5th, Slayer year 101. The meaning is immediate. This is the world of Danbure. April 5th is the day of the entrance ceremony at the Royal Academy of Sword and Magic in the royal capital. It is an unforgettable day, both in the game and now. He decides that he will attend the academy as scheduled. The maid asks whether there will be morning training, noting that he never skips it. The idea surprises him. Zenon trained every morning without fail, something never shown in the game. When she offers to prepare breakfast instead, he chooses to train as usual and asks to be taken to the training ground. There, he looks around and feels his body move naturally. Though he lacks formal knowledge of martial arts, he understands that this level of skill cannot be achieved through talent alone. The body feels familiar, as if he has lived in it since birth. Zenon is capable of advanced dark magic, meaning he trained not only with swords but also with magic. Accepting reality, he resolves to learn everything about Zenon while living in this body. He pauses and reflects that the only reason he hated Zenon was because of what he became later in the story. At this point in time, before the entrance ceremony and before the events of the first game, none of those actions have happened. There is no reason to hate him yet. Now that he has become Zenon, he decides to avoid the path shown in the second game. He will not pursue the same immoral developments. Depending on his position, he could support Leon in defeating the Demon King, or simply avoid danger altogether. The maid brings him water. He thanks her sincerely. She freezes in shock, unable to believe that Zenon is thanking her. He notices her reaction and realizes how rarely gratitude was shown. He tells her that he truly appreciates her devotion and support, and admits that he was too ashamed to say it before. He resolves not to become the villain Zenon once was and chooses to change while he still can. The maid is overwhelmed, calling it the happiest day of her life. She cries with joy, feeling rewarded at last. He acknowledges that her reaction is exaggerated, but accepts responsibility for how she was treated before. He reassures her and prepares to leave. She sees him off, wishing for his safe return, still stunned by his kindness. As he leaves, he considers how closely he should follow the game's scenario. From today's entrance ceremony, Danbure truly begins. Leon will take 2 years to defeat the Demon King alongside the heroines. As a classmate, he wonders how deeply he should involve himself in the main story. He decides that he will not steal anyone's partner and will not interfere with genuine bonds. He values pure love. In the second game's ending, Zenon steals the heroines, drives Leon into despair, and indirectly causes the resurrection of the Demon King. That path ends with large-scale magic destroying the royal capital and killing everyone. If that ending can be avoided simply by not stealing anyone, then there is no reason to follow the game's scenario at all. He chooses instead to walk Zenon's life differently, a path not written in the game. The scene shifts to the academy. Zenon stands before its gates and feels the weight of the moment, as he realizes that he has finally arrived. This is the academy where Brave Soul is set. He steadies himself and moves forward, reminding himself not to be nervous, even as he feels how pathetic that anxiety seems. He walks through the school he has experienced so many times in the game, slowly calming down. The tension drains from his body, leaving him oddly tired. Soon, the entrance ceremony will be held in the auditorium. After that, class-specific orientations will follow. Later, the girls will invite Leon to a social gathering where he grows close to the heroines. It is the legendary social gathering event. The thought almost makes Zenon laugh, but he stops himself and resolves not to show that reaction in public. He tells himself there is no need to be afraid and that he should avoid drawing attention to himself. The scene shifts to the classroom. Zenon suddenly finds himself alone, seated apart from the others. He accepts it without much concern, reminding himself that he is the villain character, Zenon Baskerville, and that being alone does not bother him. The teacher announces the entrance exam results. 5th place is called, and Shell Uranus stands to respond. This is the moment when the main heroine is revealed. She is the daughter of a local noble from the frontier and Leon's childhood friend. She met Leon in their village and encouraged him to enroll in the academy. Her initial job is mage, a rare role that specializes in offensive magic. She is energetic, curious, and cheerful. 4th place is announced next, Nagisa Sekai. She comes from an eastern country with a Japanese-style culture and is the daughter of a sword master who runs a dojo. She carries darkness in her heart and whether that darkness can be overcome is central to her character arc. Her initial job is swordsman, and her weapon is a katana. She excels in speed and is known for her swift combat style. Third place is called Aerith Centrea. She is born into central nobility, and her father is a cardinal, which explains her unusual upbringing. Her appearance is well-balanced, and she stands out among the students. Her initial job is cleric. Zenon recalls her background, the influence of her parents, and the church tied to her faith. In the original story, she becomes a tragic victim who is broken both physically and mentally by Zenon, but that future no longer exists. Second place is announced next. The Academy's runner-up is Zenon Baskerville. Whispers spread immediately. He notices the attention and realizes he has missed the timing to stand. Murmurs follow, tying his name to the infamous Baskerville family, rumored to have assassinated the previous king and to be connected to criminal organizations. Some even claim they are colluding with a neighboring country. Zenon understands that he has drawn unwanted attention and feels the situation turning against him. The teacher addresses him directly, acknowledging his dissatisfaction with the results and praising his ambition as the successor of a high-ranking noble family. However, the teacher firmly reminds him that this is a meritocratic academy where nobles and commoners are equal, and that disrespectful behavior will not be tolerated regardless of family status. Zenon realizes he has completely missed the chance to stand properly. He considers doing so now, but feels it would only look awkward and invite further scrutiny. He decides to remain seated and offers a calm apology, stating that he understands the warning and will keep it in mind. Zenon notices that the heroines are watching him and realizes that his earlier tone may have sounded cheeky, even though he already apologized. The teacher responds by questioning whether Zenon has any intention of correcting his rebellious attitude. Zenon is taken aback, certain that he has already shown remorse, and grows frustrated that his delayed reaction is being treated as defiance. Because it is a celebratory day, the teacher decides to end the matter for now, but issues a warning that such behavior will not be tolerated in the future. Left in his seat, Zenon wonders what he did wrong and realizes that his unfamiliarity with his name caused him to react too late. The ceremony continues as the top achiever is announced. First place in the entrance exam goes to Leon Brave, who is named class president. Leon is introduced as the child of a hero, and the one who holds the power to seal the Demon King. Though born a commoner, he achieved the highest score through ability alone. He is known for his blonde hair, good looks, and the admiration he receives from many heroines. His initial job is Rune Knight, a rare class that combines close-range combat with magic. Zenon watches as the protagonist he has played countless times now stands before him. When Leon's gaze briefly turns toward him, Zenon feels uneasy, unsure why hostility seems to be directed at him when he has done nothing. Leon then steps forward to give the greeting on behalf of the new students. He speaks of his humble upbringing in the countryside and says he never expected to stand in such a prestigious royal academy. He expresses gratitude to his guardians, to Count Uranus who raised him like family, and to the faculty and senior students who will guide him. Leon explains that he entered the academy to grow stronger and protect the country. He notes that although the Slayer Kingdom is peaceful, evil still exists and causes suffering. He declares his intention to confront such evil, even if it is close at hand. Murmurs spread through the hall as Leon's sharp gaze turns directly toward Zenon. The sudden attention unsettles him, leaving him confused as to why the protagonist already views him with hostility. Zenon begins to form a hypothesis. Dungeon Brave Soul 2 feels like a complete dumpster fire, as if it were created by someone whose emotions were shattered by a failed relationship. In the first game, Leon was merely a mob character. He did not even have a name or an illustration. In the second game, however, he suddenly became a central figure and was given a dark backstory that never existed before. By forcefully connecting the first and second games, the setting itself may have changed. If that is the case, then Leon may already be directing hostility towards Zenon, even though Zenon has not done anything yet. If the scenario has changed, there is no guarantee that Leon will defeat the Demon King as planned. There is even a possibility that Leon could be defeated. If that happens, the world itself may perish. The ceremony comes to an end, and the announcement is made for everyone to move to their classrooms. Zenon realizes that if the scenario has changed, the knowledge he has from the game may no longer be reliable. He originally planned to do nothing and simply survive, but that approach may no longer be enough. He decides that he must act with extreme caution. He resolves not to interfere with Leon's actions and to avoid careless movement. His goal becomes clear. He wants to live a peaceful school life and not disturb Leon in any way. If there is a more reliable method, it would be to join Leon and the others and support the defeat of the Demon King. Zenon knows that he is one of the strongest characters in the world, second only to the Demon King and Leon. If the Demon King is defeated properly, the world will not perish, and a peaceful school life should be possible. He mocks himself for how difficult it is to keep Zenon wholesome. In the original story, even teachers eventually become Zenon's victims. He firmly decides that such a future will never happen. The school day ends and students are free to observe club activities. They are also free to gather and socialize. Zenon reflects that human likes and dislikes are often determined within a single moment. Given his appearance and background, he is immediately recognized as a member of the notorious Baskerville family, a family known throughout the kingdom for tyranny. He dismisses the attention and decides to return home to plan his next steps. Upon returning, the maid greets him. Zenon is startled and asks since when she has been there. She responds calmly and then informs him that his father is waiting. She asks him to come to the office immediately. The name alone carries weight. Grandolph Baskerville is Zenon's father. He is known as the ruler of the night within the kingdom, and the man who led Zenon down the path of evil in the original story. Even the information from the game makes it clear how unparalleled a villain he is. He controls the underworld, governs the criminal guild, commands assassins, sells slaves, and buries everything in darkness. No matter how much Zenon wants to avoid involvement, this man is still his father. There is no avoiding him. Zenon steels himself and enters the office. He announces himself and steps inside. Grandolph greets him coldly after a long absence. Dark magic manifests in the form of bloody chains. The spell restrains the target completely and inflicts continuous pain. For anyone else, it would be nothing but torture. As Zenon endures the restraint, Grandolph speaks calmly. He remarks on the entrance exam results and notes that Zenon placed second. Zenon endures his father's words in silence. The Baskerville family is described as a lineage of those who dominate the night, where only the strongest are allowed to stand at the top. Failing to take first place in a small academy is treated as an unforgivable disgrace. His father's disappointment is absolute, questioning whether Zenon is even worthy of being the eldest son. The family's pride is declared sullied, and Zenon is condemned as foolish and pathetic for being unable to move under such pressure. A warning is given that failure to take first place in the next exam will not be forgiven. With work calling him away, Grandolph orders Zenon to obey the steward and never neglect his training. After the punishment ends, the maid rushes to Zenon's side and urges him to endure a little longer. She begins treatment immediately, assuring him that he will recover. The scene shifts to a room in the castle where Zenon rests. He feels the damage to his body slowly fading. The maid falls asleep nearby after tending to him. Watching her, Zenon reflects that she is a good person, wasted on a depraved man who steals what belongs to others. The thought brings pain, especially when recalling the abuse and torture. He cannot understand how a father could treat his own son with such cruelty. The cause becomes clear in his mind. Zenon's descent into madness began with Grandolph Baskerville. Daily abuse crushed him over time, stripping away his mental balance. That pressure eventually led to the act of framing Leon and stealing the heroines. Leon, born of a heroic bloodline, is loved by many and stands above Zenon as the top student. Zenon, born into a cursed family, is despised by his peers and raised without affection. To him, Leon must have been an unbearable presence. Leon becomes a hero, defeats the Demon King, and is celebrated by the world. He possesses everything Zenon longs for but can never reach. That envy turns into hatred, and hatred into action. A resolve forms. Before facing the Demon King, there is someone else who must be defeated. Grandolph Baskerville becomes Zenon's true enemy, a man who should not exist. Zenon decides that this world will be lived on his own terms. He will reject both the twisted story written by the creators and the path forced upon him by his father. The maid awakens, and Zenon addresses her, confirming her name as Lavina. She reacts with surprise, but he remains calm. His next step is preparation. He begins confirming his knowledge of the game's scenario, writing everything down in Japanese so it remains clear. He records future events, important items, and key points. When finished, he decides the information is sufficient. He then turns to the question of how to live in this world. The reason for his arrival remains unknown, but his identity is clear. He is Zenon Baskerville, and he intends to live fully as Zenon. To do so, Grandolph must be defeated. Leaving the household is considered, but that path is immediately dismissed. Gangsters and assassins would surely be sent after him. Escape is impossible. There is another concern. Deviating too far from the scenario would make Leon's actions unpredictable. Ideally, Leon will seal the Demon King as planned. If Leon fails, the world will be destroyed. Zenon understands this clearly. The man who ruined Leon, who ruined the world, and who ruined Zenon himself must never be allowed to exist again. The path forward is narrow, but the goal is set. Zenon realizes that in order to grow stronger, he must acquire and develop skills. His status appears, showing that Zenon Baskerville's job is Magic Swordsman. There are no levels in Danbura. Instead, skills have proficiency values, and increasing those values is how strength is gained. His job matches the one from the game, a magic swordsman like Leon. The listed proficiencies are swordsmanship at 20, dark magic at 20, and training at 20. Zenon understands why swordsmanship and dark magic are equal, but he is confused about why training has increased. He cannot remember when or how it rose and hopes there will be no reason to make use of it. The status display differs from the game. There are no commands for items, settings, saving, or loading. The maximum value for combat skills is still far from the limit, leaving plenty of room for growth. Zenon concludes that he must learn new skills and raise their proficiency. By increasing certain skills to specific levels, the path from an initial class to higher classes will open. Items are also necessary. There are many he wants to secure. Strong weapons and armor can raise ability values, while certain items allow the learning of new skills and magic. Accessories and damage-reducing talismans also exist, making them important targets. Items can be purchased from shops, obtained in dungeons, or earned through events. Rare items appear only at auctions and require enormous funds. Dungeon drops are random, making reliable acquisition difficult. Zenon reminds himself that items should ideally go to Leon. Taking something important and causing Leon to lose to the Demon King would be disastrous. Even though he no longer intends to follow the scenario exactly, he must avoid interfering with Leon. That would lead to a complete failure. A knock comes at the door. Lavina asks for permission to enter and brings breakfast, explaining that she thought Zenon might be unwell. Zenon feels relieved, realizing how hungry he is. The meal has recovery and support effects. The sandwich and soup restore health, while the coffee cures status ailments. He senses Lavina's care and concern and thanks her sincerely, saying the food looks delicious. Lavina replies that she is only doing her duty as a maid and insists she deserves no thanks. Zenon repeats his gratitude anyway. Lavina suddenly begins to cry and hurriedly leaves the room, apologizing and saying she will return later to clear the dishes. Zenon is stunned. He wonders if she became so emotional from being thanked that she even got a nosebleed. The intensity surprises him. He reflects on how deeply she seems to care for Zenon and realizes that he already has proper allies. There was never any need to go mad or steal someone else's partner. The head butler greets him. Zaius introduces himself formally and explains that he manages the household. He says he was concerned because Zenon did not train in the garden that morning and wondered if he was unwell. Zenon asks whether the butler plans to report this to his father. Zaius responds that Lord Baskerville expects Zenon to grow into a strong individual, worthy of the family name, and has high expectations for him. He expresses his sincere hope that Zenon will not betray those expectations. Zenon replies calmly that there will be times when he takes breaks from training, but there is no need for concern. He assures the butler that he will meet his father's expectations. Zaius then asks if Zenon has a plan to become stronger. Zenon answers that endlessly practicing swings is not the only way to gain strength. He says he will become strong in his own way, strong enough to surprise his father. With that, he takes his leave. A week passes after that. Whispers follow Zenon wherever he goes, and his solitary life remains unchanged. He wonders how everyone truly sees him. Leon continues to show nothing but hostility. Zenon no longer concerns himself with it. That day's lesson focuses on dungeon exploration. Zenon finds the content simple, no more difficult than a middle school level. The way magic is used feels natural, as if the knowledge is already engraved into his body and surfaces without effort. The instructor orders the students to form parties before moving out. Dungeons are explained as layered spaces where monsters exist in endless numbers. Monsters and treasures naturally appear within them. Though dungeons produce resources infinitely and are considered treasure troves, they are also dangerous. If left unattended, they become ticking time bombs that endlessly release monsters. The Academy itself was established to deal with this threat. Its purpose is to exterminate dungeon monsters and train people capable of protecting civilian lives. The destination is announced as the Sacred Playground, a tutorial dungeon owned by the Academy. Each party will enter the dungeon in turn. A woman wearing glasses declares that she has no intention of joining a party. She insists that she is perfectly fine on her own and does not need anyone else. As Zenon listens, he feels a sharp sting in his nose for reasons he cannot explain. The woman repeats that she has no problems acting alone. Zenon observes Nagisa Sekai. At this point in time, she keeps her distance from others and shows little interest in interacting. Her being helped by Leon and eventually opening her heart is still a story far in the future. Zenon knows that exploring a dungeon alone is dangerous, especially on a first attempt, but Nagisa shows no interest in teaming up. Zenon accepts this without protest. He decides it is better to keep contact with the main heroine to a minimum. He does not want to interfere with Leon's path. For now, staying out of the way feels like the safest choice. The instructor explains that there are no particularly dangerous monsters in this dungeon, but any incident that occurs inside is the student's own responsibility. In the unlikely event of death, the Academy will bear no responsibility, and reckless behavior is strictly warned against. She instructs everyone to remain seated and explains the procedure. Parties will enter the dungeon in order with a 10-minute interval between each group. Students are reminded to properly bring back collected items and materials dropped by defeated monsters. The Management Guild will not purchase these items, but the results will be reflected in their grades. Excitement immediately spreads through the class. Several students argue over who will go first, each insisting that it should be them. The eagerness is obvious, and it feels more like preparing for an outing than a dangerous lesson. The instructor considers stepping in to decide the order. Nagisa comments that they are acting far too carefree for something this dangerous. Zenon notices her speaking and realizes that this is the first time a classmate has directly addressed him. Nagisa bluntly remarks that it is obvious people would be scared of him just by looking at his face. Zanon apologizes without resistance and asks what she wants. Nagisa explains that he seems to be the only one with nothing to do and asks him to tell everyone not to argue. She declares that she will take the lead herself. Zenon reacts lightly and asks if she is trying to outdo him. He agrees to leave it to her. He notes that she has a surprisingly good personality. Other students immediately protest, calling it unfair, but Nagisa ignores them and enters the dungeon without hesitation. Zenon watches and mutters that it is unfair, finding her behavior selfish. He raises his voice and scolds the others for wasting time. He tells them to make a decision quickly, whether through rock, paper, scissors or a lottery, and points out that the sun is already going down. Leon announces that it is now their turn and leads his group forward. Zenon is surprised when the instructor comments that he displayed unexpected leadership skills. She admits that she had assumed things based on his appearance and family background, just as the other students did. As a teacher, she reflects on her mistake. She then asks whether Zenon is truly fine with being last, noting that he did not participate in deciding the order. Zenon responds calmly and asks to confirm something first. He asks whether items and treasures obtained from this dungeon are subject to taxation. The instructor explains that since this is a school-managed dungeon used for lessons, no taxes apply. However, the items found here have little value if sold. She adds that because there are no strong monsters, casualties are extremely rare. Zenon expresses relief and says he will focus on searching for items. Because Zenon is entering alone, the instructor advises him not to hesitate to retreat if things become dangerous. Zenon thanks her for her concern, surprised by her kindness despite his reputation. He reflects that she seems to be a reliable and good teacher. He also remembers what she becomes in the game's future, a woman who enforces discipline in a basement and is reduced to a cruel fate. He firmly resolves that such a world will never be allowed to exist again. With his resolve set, Zenon prepares himself. He declares that it's time to conquer the dungeon. Whatever awaits him beyond the entrance, he steps forward to face it. Zenon advances through the dungeon, his weapon swinging again and again. Each strike lands cleanly and items drop as expected. Slime cores scatter across the ground. The dungeon's structure and the dropped materials are exactly like those in the game. Because this is a tutorial dungeon, there are only monsters and no traps, which makes solo exploration manageable. With steady movements, he cuts down each enemy and collects the drops. It feels like light work. However, he knows the real challenge lies deeper. The monsters on the lower floors are different. Still, no matter how many appear, they are nothing more than small fry. To him, they are little more than punching bags. With that thought, he moves on to the next area. He reaches the second floor. After a brief moment, he checks himself and realizes he has taken minor damage. Even against weak enemies, the fact that he was hurt irritates him. It is his first dungeon run, and he accepts that some mistakes are unavoidable. He presses forward without stopping. Soon he steps onto the third floor. He recalls that only Leon, Shell, and Nagisa ever reached the deepest layer during this stage. As expected, the number of enemies increases here. He looks over the injured students and thinks that in a class filled with people relying on cheat-like abilities, it would be better to cooperate outside the academy later. Teaming up with careless people would only slow him down. Nearby, a healer instructs the injured to line up properly. One student thanks her, while another relaxes under the gentle effect of the magic, calling it soothing. Praise follows as her ability is recognized, noting that no matter how many people she heals, her mana never seems to run out. Gratitude is directed toward Aerith Centrea. Watching the scene, Zenon admits to himself that she is the kind of person he could easily fall for if he kept staring. He quickly looks away, deciding it would lead to a bad outcome if he became involved, and choosing instead to move on. Aerith notices him and addresses him by name, confirming that he is Zenon Baskerville. He acknowledges her and recognizes her as the Academy's third-ranked student, Centrea. She responds politely, addressing him as a junior. The surrounding students grow tense. Aerith asks whether he needs healing, then concludes that he does not, since this is only a tutorial dungeon. When she asks what he has been doing, she explains her own actions calmly, saying that she has been healing everyone because she cannot leave injured people unattended. Zenon asks the merciful healer whether she should not be moving forward. She answers that she has already received permission from her friends and believes it is more important for everyone present to advance one step at a time than for her party alone to reach its goal. Aerith Centrea embodies dedication and self-sacrifice. She is the type who would give herself up for anyone. In the game, there were moments when she risked her life to save those in danger. Her saintly behavior is admirable, yet it always made Zenon uneasy. She is not a bad person, but her willingness to abandon her own happiness for others feels excessive and difficult to accept. Zenon thinks that such ideals are better left to the hero to deal with. Before leaving, he tells her that he is moving ahead and advises her to continue helping others, but to do so in moderation. Zenon recognizes that it is not his role to save Aerith, the wounded saint. Freeing her from the cycle of self-sacrifice belongs to Leon, not to him. This is not his stage. Like a villain, he decides to leave quietly and moves forward to the fourth floor. As expected, none of his classmates have reached this far. Most likely, only Leon, Shell, and Nagisa have already arrived at the lowest floor. The monster that should have been there has probably been defeated by Leon. Zenon feels a slight sense of dissatisfaction, wondering if this is truly the end of his first dungeon. That thought is shattered by a panicked shout echoing through the corridor. A desperate voice screams for someone to get back, warning that death is certain if they do not move. Zenon realizes that something is wrong. The monster that should only appear on the lowest floor, a gargoyle, is here instead. A student cries out in rage, cursing the creature for harming Alicia. The gargoyle lets out a brutal roar as chaos unfolds. Leon, Shell, and Nagisa fight together. Leon questions why the gargoyle is here, as it was supposed to be fought on the lowest floor. He awakens the power of the hero's bloodline, the strength meant to drive the gargoyle back. Then the realization strikes. This event was mentioned briefly in the game. The gargoyle fled from the lower floor and began killing students while escaping. Leon blames himself for allowing the enemy to escape. Because of that failure, classmates are dying. This loss becomes the catalyst for Leon's growth. He reflects deeply on his weakness, trains himself, and becomes stronger. It is a classic turning point. Zenon understands what this means. Someone here is destined to die. A nameless character whose only role is to fall so that the hero may rise. They have lives of their own, yet their fate is to be sacrificed for Leon's development. Intervening would change the future. If Zenon acts here, the path where Leon defeats the Demon King and saves the world could be altered. The choice is cruel but clear. Ignoring them is the only way to preserve the future. Zenon tells himself not to misunderstand this moment. Zenon shouts for the others to run, insisting that he will hold the monster back even if it costs his life. He refuses to abandon anyone. An injured boy curses in despair. An injured girl accepts that they are going to die. The gargoyle roars again as it closes in. Zenon clenches his teeth. He curses under his breath and admits that being a villain does not suit him at all. Zenon realizes that a hero who cannot grow stronger because of a rewritten scenario is not a true hero. If he were to abandon the situation now, he would be nothing but trash. He refuses to let his classmates die for the sake of preserving the scenario. The gargoyle roars in fury, mocking humans and declaring that none of them will escape. Zenon steps forward without hesitation and dismisses the creature as nothing more than a tutorial boss that has no right to boast. He ridicules the monster for thinking it can get away with this, and declares himself a villain so formidable that even the protagonist cannot defeat him. Compared to that, a mere monster stands no chance. The gargoyle scoffs and calls Zenon's efforts useless, but Zenon acknowledges its toughness as the clash begins, fully committed to the fight he has chosen. Zenon dismisses the gargoyle as nothing more than a stiff wooden doll, and finds its presence irritating. He quickly realizes that its strength matches that of monsters encountered in the mid-game. With only his starting equipment, a rusted sword, he cannot land a single effective blow. He unleashes Shadow Edge, but the gargoyle counters with brute force. Zenon assesses the situation and concludes that the creature has extremely high physical defense, but low resistance to magic. In that case, magic is the only viable option. Even so, he knows the problem remains. He wonders how many dozens of magic attacks it will take to finally bring the gargoyle down. Zenon admits that, under normal circumstances, this is an enemy meant to be defeated by a party. Unfortunately, he is fighting alone. He steels himself and resolves to kill it. Since brute force will not work, he decides to end it in a single decisive strike. As he trades blows with the monster, he recalls that every enemy in Danbur has a weak point that triggers a critical hit when struck. For a gargoyle, that weak point lies beneath the chin. He focuses his attacks there, determined not to miss. He mocks the creature as he fights, calling it humiliating for a monster, once defeated by the hero, to now be killed by someone it considers inferior. The gargoyle roars and charges, intent on killing. Zenon pushes forward without hesitation. He reminds himself that the strongest starting job in the game is magic swordsman. That means both he and Leon possess overwhelming potential. There is no way he should lose to a mere starting boss like this. He does not know how defeating an event monster will affect the future, but this is the first real battle he has fought since coming to this world. He claims the victory as his own. More than that, he allows himself to acknowledge what truly matters. He has saved lives that were meant to be lost in the original story. After the fight, Zenon turns back to the injured students and asks if they are all right. One of the boys thanks him, admitting that Zenon saved them. Zenon notices that they are running low on healing potions and offers his own. The boy hesitates, saying he has nothing to repay him with, but Zenon brushes it off, saying the items are cheap and not worth worrying about. The boy thanks him sincerely. A girl lies unconscious nearby. Zenon checks her condition and confirms that she will be fine. He feels relieved that both of them survived. The injured students stare at Zenon in disbelief. One of them speaks up, calling out his name and saying that he truly saved them. Zenon brushes it off, saying it was only natural since they are classmates. The boy insists that his gratitude goes beyond the medicine. He thanks Zenon for killing the monster, admitting that no one expected such a powerful enemy to appear in this dungeon. He explains that it was an irregular situation, and that even if they had lost, it would not have meant much. Still, he blames himself as the leader for allowing his friends to be hurt. If only he were stronger, they would not have faced such danger. Zenon notices the boy's strong sense of responsibility. He realizes that the boy genuinely feels accountable for his teammates' injuries. It seems excessive for someone considered a mere background character. Zenon tells him that if he feels responsible, then the answer is simple. He should become stronger so that he can protect his friends next time. The boy accepts this firmly and says that he wants to become strong like Zenon. Zenon replies that there is no need to use him as an example. Academy life is long, and doing one's best is enough. The boy apologizes again, but Zenon cuts him off, saying he has already heard it, and that repeating it is annoying. The boy explains that he misunderstood Zenon before and wants to apologize properly. He admits that Zenon's face looks intimidating, and that the Baskerville family has a terrible reputation. Zenon acknowledges this without denying it. The boy continues, saying that Zenon could have abandoned them, but instead risked his life to save them and even shared healing items. He admits that they ignored Zenon in class without ever speaking to him and asks for forgiveness. Zenon hesitates. He realizes that this is the first time he has ever spoken properly with a classmate, having always been a loner. He feels awkward and unsure of what to say. He tells the boy not to worry about it, stating plainly that his face really is scary and that the Baskerville family is indeed infamous. He then prepares to move on, handing over an item and telling them to use it while they retreat safely. The boy recognizes the item as a monster-repelling talisman. Zenon explains that it only works on weak monsters, but should be sufficient for the enemies in this dungeon. The boy promises to repay the favor someday. Zenon replies that repayment can wait until the boy succeeds, then takes his leave and moves deeper into the dungeon. He reaches the lowest floor, the sacred playground. There, someone recognizes him as Baskerville. Leon approaches and asks if Zenon is all right, remarking that he seems unharmed. Leon questions how Zenon knew they were in danger and wonders whether Zenon was involved. Zenon answers calmly, saying that a powerful monster appeared earlier, and he assumed Leon's group might have encountered it as well. Leon asks whether Zenon was attacked by that monster, and calls it a miracle that he survived. Zenon confirms that he is fine, but mentions that there are injured classmates. Leon reacts in shock, realizing that it happened because he allowed the monster to escape. Nagisa immediately denies that it was Leon's fault. A younger girl adds that without Leon's help, they might have been killed. She says that Leon protected them. Leon is consumed by guilt. He says that if he had defeated the monster properly, their classmates would not have suffered. He questions what it means to be a descendant of a hero and calls himself powerless. Zenon calls out to him, but Leon remains overwhelmed. Nagisa watches silently. Zenon reflects on the original scenario. In it, the enemy Leon allowed to escape killed a classmate, becoming the catalyst for Leon's growth through regret and self-reflection. Now that events have changed, Zenon wonders whether Leon will still experience the same growth. In this altered scenario, he questions what path the protagonist will choose next. Leon clenches his fists and says that he cannot forgive himself. Zenon watches him in silence. A girl steps forward and tells Leon not to blame himself. She says that without him, Nagisa, herself, and their classmates would have died. Even though some were injured, Leon still saved everyone. Zenon wonders how Leon will grow from this point on. No matter how much he thinks about it, he realizes it is impossible to predict. He decides that instead of worrying about the future, he should focus on what he can do right now. With that thought, he says that it is time for him to leave and wishes them safety on their way back. Leon calls out to him, addressing him as Baskerville. Zenon stops and asks if Leon still needs something, adding that he is in a hurry and asking him to be brief. Leon thanks him and acknowledges that Zenon gave medicine to the injured classmates. He admits that Zenon cleaned up the aftermath of his failure. Zenon is surprised as he never expected Leon, who had shown nothing but hostility until now, to thank him. Leon then adds that Zenon should not misunderstand him. He says that he will never forgive an evildoer like Zenon, and declares that Zenon will face judgment one day. Before Zenon can respond, Leon turns away and leaves. Something makes Zenon stop, and he lets out a quiet sigh before calling after Leon, telling him to wait. Before he can say anything more, Nagisa approaches and calls him by the Baskerville name. Zenon reacts with surprise. Nagisa asks directly whether he was the one who defeated the gargoyle. Zenon does not deny it and calmly asks what if it was him. Nagisa responds that it confirms her suspicion. Among the entire class, his presence alone felt completely different, and she trusts that her eyes did not deceive her. She then declares that they should spar sometime, saying that only by fighting strong opponents can a person truly grow stronger. Zenon feels a headache coming on as he realizes that troublesome people have begun to take an interest in him. He accepts that difficult days are likely ahead. Zenon suddenly notices a gleam ahead and stops. Before him lies a treasure chamber, overflowing with gold coins. As he looks around, he realizes that the dungeon has been fully cleared. He completed the mission with hardly any injuries. A medal rests nearby, proof that the sacred playground has been conquered. The final battle gave him more trouble than expected. At first, he thought simply driving the gargoyle away would be enough, but without collecting the medal, the floor would not register as cleared. It is a classic mistake made by careless players. The thought crosses his mind that Leon and the others might have forgotten their own medal. If that is the case, he can only feel sympathy for them. He moves forward and suddenly freezes. A room that should not exist yet stands before him. It is the chamber of the Nouveau Rush. Normally, it only appears after clearing the dungeon multiple times. Inside, gold is piled everywhere. Among the treasures, he finds a magic bag. The chamber is known as a place where accumulated wealth from previous runs can be stored, allowing items to be held without limit. It is a key item of great value. Faced with the sheer amount of treasure, Zenon realizes that he has effectively become wealthy in an instant. He prepares to gather everything. Then something catches his attention. Among the treasure rests a sword. It is the Demon Blade, Heavenly Feather Cutter. The sword is curved like a Japanese katana, crimson veins running through its blade. Zenon recognizes it at once. This is the weapon he once used in the game, the blade he spent countless hours perfecting. He remembers gathering materials, commissioning blacksmiths, and strengthening it again and again. Its power surpasses even the ultimate weapon, the Holy Sword X-Brave, which is normally obtained in the latter half of the story. If its skills are fully mastered, it can deal massive damage even to the Demon King in hard mode. The realization strikes him. If this sword exists here, then the room must be filled with items based on his saved data. That means his Danburus save file has been carried into this world. This cannot be a coincidence. He did not come to this world, nor into Zenon's body by his own will. Someone must have deliberately caused this. The question is who and why. Why not Leon, the main character, but Zenon, a side character? There must be meaning behind it. Whether it was a god or a devil, someone intended for him to be here, and somehow they even brought his saved data along. As these thoughts race through his mind, the metal in his hand draws attention. A voice interrupts. The teacher formally announces that Zenon Baskerville has cleared the sacred playground. Zenon is stunned. He did not realize it counted as an official clearance. That means Leon and the others did not notice. It was not just field training, but a proper test. After all the trouble of defeating the event boss, he will still have to return to this dungeon again in a few days. The thought leaves him slightly disappointed. The teacher gives him permission to explore other dungeons and praises him for surviving, despite the appearance of the gargoyle. She warns him not to push himself too hard. Zenon acknowledges her words but knows he must act quickly. He needs companions. Always going solo has its limits. Most of the equipment and items he obtained from the room of the Nouveau Riche cannot be used yet. His skill proficiency is too low. Raising it is unavoidable. High-level dungeons make solo play extremely dangerous. If an abnormal status like paralysis or petrification occurs, medicine alone will not be enough. Without a companion who can purify such effects, death would be certain. Companions are essential. Yet Zenon has none. He does not have capable allies like Leon, and relying on classmates feels unrealistic. In Danbur, there is a side heroine who works as a mercenary. If paid enough, she can join as a companion, but mercenaries cannot be fully trusted. In critical moments, they may flee or steal loot. That leaves only one option. Slaves can be purchased at auctions and used as companions. In the Slayer Kingdom, slavery is legal, and enslavement magic enforces semi-permanent loyalty. As someone raised with modern values, Zenon hesitates. The idea leaves a bitter taste, but this world offers no second chances. If he wants to survive, he needs faithful subordinates. Even if that means owning slaves, there is no alternative. He cannot afford idealism here. He has no option to quit. Survival comes first. The auction hall welcomes Zenon with hollow politeness, addressing him as the young master of the Baskerville family and guiding him to a seat near the front. He accepts calmly, even as disgust lingers beneath the surface. Dealing with slave traders is repulsive, yet unavoidable. If he intends to stand against his father, who rules the underworld from its pinnacle, he needs subordinates of his own. As the auction begins, slaves are brought forward one after another and bids fly across the room. Numbers rise rapidly from hundreds of thousands to sums that reach into the millions, each sale concluded with practiced cheer from the auctioneer. Zenon watches in silence, aware that his pockets are heavy with gold taken from the room of the Nouveau Riche. He has more than enough to buy one or two slaves. His attention shifts as he activates an item he obtained earlier, God's Eye. Normally used to appraise monsters, it allows him to see skills and proficiencies at a glance. As slaves pass before him, information overlays his vision. Charm skills and servitude abilities appear, but none match what he is looking for. Such skills can be learned later. What matters most are innate abilities, which grow far faster and define true potential. Still, none of the current offerings interest him, and he begins to consider other options. Then the final slave of the day is announced. a rare dragonkin-related race, an Oni girl brought from the northern demi-human continent. The moment Zenon sees her, shock runs through him. A young, white-haired Oni stands before the crowd, her white skin contrasting sharply with crimson horns and golden eyes. He recognizes her instantly. Ulsa, a white ogre. She should not exist in this world. Ulsa was never a character in Danbura. She originated from Warlord of the Holy See, another game by the same developers, a war simulation set in a distant island nation. In that game, Ulsa was meant to be a powerful ally, not a slave in a dungeon fantasy world. As bidding escalates, Zenon's thoughts race. The presence of Ulsa means the boundaries between game worlds are collapsing. Danbur, its sequel, and even Holy See may not be separate settings at all, but parts of a single wider world. Or perhaps they were always connected, only divided by perspective and stage. The idea unsettles him. As the bids climb, God's Eye reveals Ulsa's status clearly. Physical reinforcement at a high level, super strength beyond most humans. Hammer mastery already well developed, her potential is undeniable. Zenon understands then that something far greater is at work. This world is no longer bound by a single game's rules. Scenarios are merging, data is crossing over, and characters meant to exist elsewhere are appearing here. Whatever force brought him into this body did not act randomly, and standing before him now is proof that this world is far more dangerous and far more complex than he ever imagined. Zenon studies Ulsa and realizes she has 3 innate skills, all focused on combat. With that level of power, she is exactly the kind of talent he needs. Still, doubt creeps in. If the world of Holy See is truly connected to this one, then Ulsa should be following her own story. In that world, she begins as a slave, and later becomes a companion to the main character. Zenon wonders if this auction is the moment where her fate first changes. If he buys her now, will he interfere with another story? Is it right to involve her in his situation when she may belong to someone else's future? Despite his hesitation, Zenon steps forward and places a bid of 6,500,000. The hall reacts at once. Another bidder quickly raises the price to 10 million. The sudden jump stuns the room. 10 million is enough to fully equip a strong party and challenge a final boss. Zenon realizes the weight of what he is doing. This choice could change the future. Ulsa is meant to be rescued later after suffering cruelty at the hands of nobles. Knowing that, Zenon cannot bring himself to ignore her. Even if the story changes, he believes the other protagonist can handle it. He accepts that he cannot fully become the cold villain Zenon was meant to be. The auction continues. Another bidder raises the price again, but Zenon pushes it higher, reaching 12 million. The auction ends there. Ulsa is sold to him, and the hall applauds. The next day, Ulsa is brought to his room. She introduces herself politely and clings to him with open affection, declaring her devotion. Zenon is surprised. In Holy See, Ulsa was quiet and emotionless, but now she behaves warmly and openly. He wonders if this is who she truly was before being broken by her past. Zenon realizes that taking her outside dressed like this would only worsen his already terrible reputation. He asks Lespold if there are spare clothes. Lespold agrees and sends Ulsa to the waiting room to change. Ulsa hesitates, clearly nervous, but Zenon reassures her and promises to wait. After some time, she returns and announces that she is ready. Zenon tells her to come out so he can see her.
Here I am, know it's been